XPression FM presents the Me Too podcast. Me Too. Me Too. Me Too. Me Too. Me Too. Me Too.
In light of the #MeToo campaign, a flood of new sexual harassment and assault stories have come to the forefront across both social media and the news. In this three-part series, we will be looking at sexual harassment and assault within society, within university, and also looking at the reporting and recovery process. In this episode, we're discussing the issue of sexual harassment and assault within university. The following podcast series contains content some may find disturbing. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men will be sexually assaulted at university, according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Centre. Sexual harassment and gender-based misconduct by university staff in the UK has hit epidemic levels, according to a report by The Guardian. Freedom of information requests by The Guardian newspaper sent to 120 universities, including Exeter University, found that students made at least 169 such allegations against academic and non-academic staff from 2011 to 12 to 2016 to 17. At least another 127 allegations about staff were made by fellow colleagues. In Exeter alone, there were 5 staff on student sexual harassment allegations from 2011-2012. Due to these allegations, 1 member of staff left the university. Across the Atlantic in the US, the Association of American Universities found that most respondents who reported sexual assault to them said they did not report the incident to police or campus authorities because they did not consider the event serious enough to report, even when it included forced penetration. Since first recording this podcast, news stories have come to the forefront regarding sexual harassment and assault at university. At the University of Warwick, a group chat of some 11 students was uncovered, where the topic of rape was discussed in jest. The boys discussed raping female students, saying, "Rape her friends too. Sometimes it's fun to just go wild and rape 100 girls." The next message reads, "Rape the whole flat to teach them all a lesson." In another message, one boy discusses a girl in his flat saying, "I'm going to go all 1945 advancing Soviet army on her and rape her in the street whilst everybody watches." Another boy says that this wouldn't even be unfair. In another screenshot where the group discusses girls at their uni reporting sexual assault, one member says, "Why is it always the moany fucks who have things happen to them?" And another says that a girl the group knows is simply not attractive enough for all of those things to occur to her. In further screenshots, a member of the chat asks, "What do we do with girls?" Rape. He also makes several references to rape, including having surprise sex with some freshers. The assault joked about ranges from one individual saying that a girl deserves hair straighteners on her flaps, to another saying that she deserved a punch in the clit. Among other messages in the chat were, "She looks like a rape victim," and "Rape the limbless freak." The group chat had at one time been called "Fuck Women, Disrespect Them All." It is believed that of the 11 suspended students, many of them held senior and executive positions in academic and sporting societies at Warwick University. Not long after this story was released, Coventry University's cricket club group chat was exposed, where the boys rated the girls they'd had sex with. In one screenshot, the male Coventry Uni student rates a girl he had slept with out of 10 across various categories, such as forehead, face, personality, arse, sexual creativity and sexual skills. After the list of numbered ratings, he says, "Up there with one of the worst blowjobs I've ever received. Very teethy. Pussy so wide you could fit a bus in there. Massive flaps, terrible technique on top. However, loves it in the arse, so overall, what a slag." Another screenshot reads, "We are about to potentially Eiffel Tower a bird. #Coventry Uni Cricket Club legends." An Eiffel Tower is a threesome between 2 men and a woman. It is unclear whether these men received any disciplinary measures from the university. Now, let's actually define sexual harassment and assault and give some examples of each. Sexual harassment is the making of unwanted sexual advances or obscene remarks. Examples of sexual harassment include wolf whistling, lewd comments and catcalling. Sexual assault is, according to the British Sexual Offences Act of 2003, when a person intentionally touches another person sexually without their consent. Sexual assault is an umbrella term that includes sexual activity such as rape, fondling and attempted rape. Therefore, groping at clubs does constitute sexual assault. With these definitions in mind, we thought we'd look at stories from university students to see the extent of the issue. Here are several students' #MeToos.
During Freshers' Week in my first year of uni, I went to a flat party with my friends. One of my male friends gave me a piggyback, and whilst I was on his back, I felt someone grab my bum. I turned around to see a guy who'd walked to the party with us, who wiggled his eyebrows at me. Later on, I confronted him, saying, "You grabbed my arse." Someone overheard us and asked if it was true. He said, "Yeah, like this," and grabbed me again.
So I work at a restaurant in Exeter every Saturday night on the high street, which means my walk home is usually around 11:30, midnight, and I'm always very sober after my shift, whilst everyone else is usually quite drunk. I've worked at the restaurant for 2 years, and I've not once walked home without being on the phone to someone, calling someone, meeting a friend. I'm not being paranoid. That doesn't come from word of mouth. This is because I've been shouted at, wolf whistled, harassed in various ways and threatening ways whilst walking home at that time. Specifically, I'd say worse on a Friday or Saturday night. For example, just last week, I was walking down Sidwell Street. I tend to take the main roads as they're more well lit, with more security cameras around the shops, for the reason that of harassment, and a guy ran up towards me and pointed in my face and shouted, "You are Peng," and then laughed and ran on. Now, some people, you might be like, well, he was complimenting you. I don't take it as a compliment. He had no idea if I'd previously been sexually harassed quite significantly, if I had any anxiety about those things, and it's just unacceptable and threatening behaviour. There is nothing positive about doing that to someone, about scaring someone in that way. Luckily, I was on the phone to someone at the time. I was on the phone to my mum, but she panicked after that point and was worried about me getting home. And I'm sure other people have been in the same situation where they feel like they have to phone someone, let someone know that they've got home safe. And this is all in a relatively safe town. I've spoken to friends about this incident, and they mentioned similar incidents of, for example, of shouting "nice legs" at a girl, and no reason to say that to someone, or a car slowing down alongside her as she walked, or just generally these intimidating and threatening behaviours that just freak people out to the point where they have to phone someone while they're walking home. I do not feel safe walking in my student town a distance of a 10-minute walk. In fact, I walk the further way home so as to not be in danger.
I was at a Halloween flat party hosted by one of my friends. I knew most of the people there, but her flatmates had invited some people I wasn't familiar with. I was stood chatting with my friends when I felt someone slap me really hard on the bottom. I turned around, thinking it might have been my boyfriend messing around, to see a guy I'd never met before disappearing into the party. I never saw him again.
I was at a nightclub in Exeter. I was stood by myself for about a minute, just trying to find my friends in the crowd, when an older man came up to me, put his hand down my back, between my legs, and then squeezed. He then stared me in the eyes, smiled, and walked away. I was so shaken up, I burst into tears and went home. This is to date the worst I've ever been assaulted in a nightclub, but I've come to expect general harassment or mild assault most times I go out. Anywhere from men groping me, saying they'd love to see me naked, or following me around the nightclub. It's sad that I've come to expect and accept this as part of a night out.
My name is Josh. I want to tell this story because I think it's an element of the debate around sexual assault or harassment that doesn't get spoken about. It's a bit of a nuanced issue. Now, this story isn't a story of assault per se, at least not in the physical sense of things. It's more of a story about how guys in general can be put into awkward situations where they might feel they don't really have a choice as to whether they commit certain acts or not. Now, the story I'm going to tell today is one that is a very particular story between myself and an unnamed individual, but it's something that's repeated within my life, especially at uni, quite a lot, and I think it's something that's to a wider context. So, I'm the kind of person that's quite outgoing, quite sociable. I like to go out, see my friends, but I'm also the kind of guy that, maybe it's because I was raised by my sister and my mum, but I've always been relatively in tune with girls in so much as, what they're thinking, or like their insecurities, or some of the issues that they go through. I tend to only have female friends. I struggle actually to get male friends. The issue with this, especially at university, specifically to first year, was that this would at times transpire into sleeping around. So I slept around quite a bit in first year and had a good time, and it was all, safe and on board. And sometimes I slept with people who I was friends with, and then I got a reputation and things like that. The trouble came when certain friends who were quite insecure about the way that they looked or how successful they were with guys used to see me as a potential, like, not easy target, but someone that they could like rely on and talk to and that kind of stuff, and then would quite aggressively try to sleep with me, despite on numerous occasions being like, no, I'm not comfortable with this, or like I'm not quite happy with how that kind of stuff is going. It kind of fed into their personal issues that they were going through. And then they would sort of say stuff like, you know, why would you not sleep with me? You sleep with several people, you sleep with some of our friends, like, you know, what's wrong with me? And then you get into this kind of like repetitive thing that effectively I was almost hurting them. And so it was kind of quite emotionally manipulative in some instances and would put me in uncomfortable situations. But it was always like my fault. It was never a case of, oh, he just isn't attracted to me in that way, or just doesn't want to, you know, it was always assumed that I would be happy to sleep with anyone, and therefore, why would I not sleep with them? And I think that was the hard thing for them to realise, was that I wasn't just sleeping with anyone, and I, you know, the reputation spoke louder than the actual reality of stuff. So in this one instance, a really close friend of mine decided to do this. You know, she'd come downstairs for a cup of tea and forget her keys, or you know, to her room, and we'd call State Patrol to get her back in, but it was always quite a struggle to get her back into her flat, and this started to happen more and again, and, you know, she wasn't reading the signals, or wasn't realising that I wasn't comfortable, because, you know, I was in a tricky situation. I can't just out and out say, no, I don't want to sleep with you. Anyway, it got so bad that I ended up, you know, like, fine, stay over. Things happen that I'm not comfortable with. And this is where, like, it wasn't sexual assault, it wasn't harassment, but it certainly was in the way I felt about it, because I felt I didn't have a choice in whether I could say no to. Although I'm sure if I was like, no, please leave, that'd be the case. It's just that would have, at that time, created more drama than just going ahead and sleeping with someone. I remember feeling quite disgusted with myself. Not because of who she was or anything like that, but more because I was doing something that I was really uncomfortable with, and I was giving into someone else's pressure, and I was putting more of their own self-esteem and their own desires over like mine. And I remember being, you know, halfway through sleeping with them and being like, can we stop? Because I don't feel uncomfortable with this. And then, you know, she started crying, and it was back to the same sort of thing of like, why would you not, you know, what's wrong with me? So we carried on, and then the next day it was a big joke, oh, you slept with that person, ha ha ha. And I try and laugh it off and you know, move on. I kind of ended up just trying to block it out of my mind. But I think I'll always go back to that moment and realise that I think for me that was the last straw, because it happened several times beforehand where I was doing things I didn't want to because they wanted to, and they felt insecure that I wouldn't because reputation and whatnot. I think what that story hints to is for a situation for guys, because I can't speak on behalf of women that go through harassment or assault, because I'm not one, but especially for a guy and someone who's like quite sensitive, or at least quite sensitive to other people's insecurities, desires, because you've got this kind of social situation where you're almost expected as a guy to be happy that anyone's going to sleep with you, right? That you get to just sleep around, and it's just another like notch on the belt. But that was then used in some ways against me, because the choice was taken away from me in such a way. I want to repeat, the person involved, my friend, one was not aware. I'm sure that that's what she was doing, and two, would never want to have caused me harm in any way. But it's a real tricky situation, because the harm was caused by her wanting something that's effectively not negative, right? Like, I could see as a compliment that someone wants to sleep with you. But I definitely felt trapped, and I felt forced to do things that I wasn't comfortable doing with. And that feeling of disgust the next day, and of like absolute regret, and all those situations is just really undermining to your confidence and your self-esteem. And I don't know, that it can be quite hard talking about this, because I think once you say it to other people, it's like nothing really like bad happened, like, why are you moaning? But maybe sometimes it's quite easy to undermine how strong someone else's situation can be on your own. And after feeling that, I started to see a counsellor, and I started to like talk to certain people about stuff, and why would I act in that way, and why do I find myself in those situations. But I think it's definitely an area that should elicit debate, is that emotional manipulation, whether it's like conscious or unconscious, it can be quite dangerous, if you're a guy or a girl, and it definitely forces your hand and makes you do things that you're just not comfortable with. because your friend is in pain or like your friend is feeling certain things and you could do something to help that. It definitely impacted, the way I carried myself and the way I thought about myself, and I then decided to become quite reclusive and not want to socialise and go out because it was a danger. And then it got to the stage where I was like, no, I need to stop this, I need to change this, and whenever people would come and sort of start doing this sort of things, I'd from the off be like, no, I don't want to do that. And the amount of judgment and social pressure that I ended up getting from saying no was just so overwhelmingly bigger than what seemed easier to just do something and laugh it off, I didn't have a choice in that instance, because for me to not act on someone else's desires or plans was perceived to be a lot worse. And from then on, I stopped sleeping around and I stopped enjoying myself for a while. I then learned ways to say no. It's a nuanced area, and I think it's something that does need debate, because emotional manipulation is actually quite hard to not succumb to. And I remember how bad I felt after sleeping with my friend, and I don't want to ever be back in that situation again.
I was at a club for a social and our society had booked a booth. I was having a great time dancing when a guy I didn't recognise came up to me and asked for my name and age. I told him my name and that I was 20. He remarked that I was a bit young for him as he was 26. He then grabbed me around the waist and pulled me into him and said, "I want to lick your arse out." I tried to push him away and only got free when a friend pulled me away from him, but he soon grabbed my waist again and pulled me back to him. When I eventually got away from him, a girl he was with apologised for his actions, saying that because he was German, he didn't understand the difference between being flirty and being pushy.
Having heard these powerful stories, we wanted to see what people thought universities could do to lessen the culture of sexual harassment and assault at universities. I'm here with third-year student Jules, third-year student Abby, second-year student Liv, and third-year student Phoebe to discuss the issue of sexual harassment and assault on university campuses. Here at Exeter University between 2011 and 2012, there were a reported 5 staff-on-student sexual harassment allegations, and we've just heard multiple student-on-student sexual harassment and assault stories. As a result, my first question to you is whether you believe the university do enough to prevent sexual harassment and assault.
Personally, I don't think that they do enough to stop sexual harassment or assault on campus. In instances of harassment or assault, for example, there was a boy in my first year who was following girls home, and he actually followed my friend, not just to her accommodation, he followed her into her accommodation and chased her, so she managed to run in and close her flat door, but then he was banging on her flat door and screaming at her, and essentially all he was doing was screaming at girls to give them his phone number and things, but she essentially told him to do one, and then he got very angry and chased her all the way home. She was very scared, and they called a state patrol, and obviously I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what was said, but the gist of it was that there was nothing concrete that they could pin on him, so there wasn't actually anything they could do about it. So in that instance, honestly, I feel like there should have been more done. And then when there were the fake delivery drivers that were assaulting girls, the advice that they gave was basically, don't go out at night, and if you do, go with a friend. And then there was all those posters that were like, don't get your drink spiked. It's quite victim blamey rather than actually tackling the problem, which is anyone that harasses anyone. Why do you think that this is an appropriate way to treat another human being? I think that they don't do enough focus on that.
So you think that the university focuses more on what to do to prevent yourself from being targeted rather than actually targeting the person who is the issue? Yeah, absolutely.
I know that when there was a taxi driver that was sexually assaulting girls in the back of cabs, university students, the university's advice was for girls just not to go clubbing and to not go take a taxi by yourself. So essentially, we can't walk back by ourselves, but also we can't take taxis by ourselves. So now, me and my friends, if we're getting a taxi by ourselves, we don't feel safe, and we take photographs of the number plates and send them to our friends, because you just don't know. You've just got to be careful. And it's just this innate fear of doing anything by yourself.
Something I've ended up using quite a lot is the Find My Friends on iPhone or the Snapchat Stalking, which sounds horrible, but I have a friend, I knew she'd gone out, I hadn't had a reply from her, I'd had a couple of drunk messages, I was worried about her, and I knew that she had a bit of a walk home because I live a little bit further away from the Mount Pleasant area, and the only reason that I knew she was okay is that I was sitting and I was watching her Snapchat, which I know she uses quite a lot, and I've used it before with Find Your Friends, and it's really sad that I have to feel that I have to sit there when my friend is on a night out and stalk them, essentially, because I'm worried that they're going to be in someone else's house or that they're going to end up somewhere. And I was completely watching for if she was stuck, for example, on the high street or in an area that I knew that she wouldn't usually go. And I think that's just really sad that I feel like I have to do that whilst at university. I feel like I shouldn't have to worry about that.
And the difficulty is that even if you had noticed something out of the ordinary, it would be dangerous for you to then go out and find her. You couldn't do that because then you're putting yourself in danger. So it's what happens if something does happen.
Yeah, I mean, my dad got me a rape alarm for Christmas.
I got one as well.
And he's told me to download all these different apps, so I say safe. And it's like, it's so sad that my dad thinks that's necessary for me to have. And it makes me really upset that one of my dad's biggest fears is that I'm going to get attacked on a night out. But if I do get attacked, it's not going to be because I didn't have a rape alarm. It's not going to be because I didn't have all these apps. It's going to be because someone decided that they wanted to attack me. If anyone gets attacked, it's never their fault. And I think that's something that people need to address.
Absolutely. And I think at university, in the age group that we are, you know, obviously we all go out clubbing. It is sort of an innate culture at university that you do go out clubbing. And I think a lot of blame can very easily, naively, but very easily be placed on girls for, you know, dressing sluttily and things like that. You know, oh, she was dressed that way. She was expecting it. And I was having quite an open discussion about this topic a few weeks ago. And one of the girls actually said, but when you're in the club, you're open for business. When you're there, that's you saying, I'm ready, okay? You know, I'm open for guys to come up to, whatever. And I was like, No. I go to a club to have, you know, a fun time with my friends. Why is it that we can no longer hold on to that? Why is it that it's actually thought of, you know, girls as well, that when you go to a club, this is you saying, don't worry, come at me. I'm ready for you.
If I'm in the club, I'm there to dance with my friends.
Would you say there's anything about the university experience that makes sexual harassment more of a problem?
I think in a lot of situations, people become, like, anonymous. So, like, I've been harassed and assaulted, like, quite a few times, and of all of the people that have assaulted me, I can name one person. Anyone else, I have no idea who they were. I don't know their names. I don't know anything about them. So even if I wanted to report it, I'd go and I'd be like, oh, this random guy did this to me, and then they'd be like, well, do you know anything about him? And I'd be like, not really.
I had an experience end of first year coming out of a club, and it was in the entrance to the club, and it was actually local. It wasn't a student, but he grabbed both of my boobs and jiggled them, and the bouncer was there, and the bouncer kicked me out of the club and told me that I shouldn't be wearing such low-cut tops if I didn't want this kind of thing to be happening, and said I should go home. And he let the man into the club. And
that's disgusting.
I was just in utter shock, and I remember walking back by myself. Two of my male friends that I was with at the time actually said to me, well, yeah, why are you wearing such low-cut tops? I can't tell you how angry I was. They did later apologise for those comments when they'd sobered up, but I just do not think that clothes are an invitation in any form, because your body is your own, and it's no one else's right to touch your body apart from you without invitation.
Yeah.
And I see men taking off their tops in clubs when they get overheated. Personally, I will sometimes wear a short sleeve top or something because I know how boiling hot it will get in top or whatever. And yeah, guys can take off their tops, and not obviously some men do experience sexual harassment in clubs, and I know that some women, when they're drunk, sometimes I've seen will, you know, go up to men and touch them without their permission, and I will stand up and say that's wrong, just as I would if a guy was doing it to a girl. But there's been a recent exhibition in London about What I Wore, it was called, and there's all these clothes that women were raped in or sexually assaulted in, and it ranges from hijabs to, you know, swimsuits to maternity wear, all these kind of things. So I just don't think it's to do with what you're wearing. I think it's the mentality.
Yeah, I think in the end, what you're wearing doesn't matter at all, because rape isn't about like sexual attraction, or someone doesn't sexually assault you because he thinks you're so beautiful. It's about power. So whatever you're wearing is completely irrelevant. And, you know, if someone attacks you or not doesn't have anything to do with how low cut your top was. Like, if they feel like they have the right to assault you, they will.
Well, I always give the example when I was in TP, which is a nightclub in Exeter. I was sexually assaulted on the dance floor, and actually I was wearing high-waisted trousers, a top that was covering everything, you know, literally no cleavage, no midriff. The only thing that was out was my arms. That was literally the only thing that was out. And I was really sexually assaulted there. And, you know, the girls next to me were dancing in little boob tubes, you know, little dresses. they weren't touched, I was touched. And I always say that you cannot justify to me that it was my clothes that did that. And it's utterly ridiculous that I have to think on a night out, okay, so if I wear this, that's going to be more easily held on to. This is going to... That just shouldn't be going through your head. It's ridiculous that we have to think like that.
It really is. I think also, like, lad culture in university, it contributes massively to the amount that girls get assaulted and harassed, because I do think, obviously, like, individually, I've known lads to be absolutely lovely. In a gang of lads, they're the worst. Like, they egg each other on so much. And I think also this whole idea of, like, locker room talk, where I'm sure there are boys that are absolutely lovely to all their female friends, but get them alone with the lads and, like, they're fine to talk about girls and, like, objectify them and things like that. I think also, like, when you do have, like, groups of lads, they'll be like, oh, like, look at her legs, look at her boobs, look at X, Y, Z kind of thing. And then they'll like, egg each other on, and it becomes sort of like a...
I don't necessarily think that is just exclusive to groups of men, though. I think it's a pack mentality.
Oh, yeah,
crossover sure. genders.
So bringing it back to the university, so a lot of people would say that the lad culture is really magnified within the boys' sports teams. How much can you sort of agree with that statement?
I want to step in here and say, like, I think in first year I lived in James Owen Court, which means that quite a lot of the guys that were in my halls were sports science students, and a lot of them played on quite a lot of the high profile sports teams. And I think after hearing their stories from prees and the kind of freedom that they talk about, they come back on a Wednesday night and they tell me things, and I have religiously never entered Wednesday Timepiece, which is the club that they went to, after hearing those stories. The comments that were made about women, I'm not going to mention any specifics because I think necessarily I can't like say if they were true or not, but it was this kind of predatory atmosphere. I think that there was an attempt. It was a going out on Wednesday meant that you were going out as a collective group, and there was a justification for your actions in doing that they didn't have on other nights out, that I've been on them with other nights out and never heard them make those kind of quite derogatory comments about women or some of the other girls' sports teams, because they equally go out on those nights, and that somehow through being on that one night that they get this one night to be crazy and sexual harassment is okay, and then the rest of the week it's like not okay, but for some reason because they're in a sports team they can collectively have that action.
I think it's almost as though they think that if the girls are going there, like you were saying earlier, they're expecting this to happen. It's like, well, you shouldn't go, like you just said, you don't go. You shouldn't feel like you shouldn't have to go because it's a club like any other night. And the fact that you've had these stories, I mean, obviously it will put you off, but that mentality just shouldn't be there. And I think there needs to be something done by the clubs as well to stop this sort of thing happening. You know, going back to when I was taken out of a club, bouncers, I think, do not do a satisfactory job in any club that I've ever been to stop assault.
Well, last week I was assaulted in a club, and I ended up going to the front of the club waiting for my friends to get there, and I was sort of having a small cry, like leaning against the wall. A bouncer came up to me and, "Are you all right?" And I was like, just a guy being creepy. And I was like, okay, if he does it again, I'll kick him out. It was if he does it again, like, well, he's already done it by this point. Like, why aren't you kicking him out now? But, I mean, the problem was I didn't know where he was. Like, I probably wouldn't have wanted to see him again. But also, going back to the sports socials, I have a friend who plays lacrosse, and obviously they have a girls and a boys team. The girls and the boy team pre-separately and then go out as a big group together. My friend will only ever go to the lacrosse girls pre's. She will not go out with them because she just refuses to go out with the lacrosse boys on a night out. I hate that there's this whole idea of, like, self-preservation, like, don't go out with sports lads because they'll assault you, and it's like, it shouldn't be like that.
Well, so in a Wednesday TP that I went to a couple of weeks ago, I kissed a rugby guy, and I was then told, someone came up to me moments later, one of the other rugby guys, and I was told that I was now his woman, for want of a better word, and I was given I was branded with a number on my chest, felt tipped on, that did not come off for the next 3 days. So I was given this branded number for the next 3 days of I belong to him now. So there really is just... But I would like to also say this is not just reserved to a lad culture or just the boys' teams. You know, I've heard equally awful things from girls' sports teams as well, and I think it's very important to say that there are some girls who do go out and they're very much looking for that. And I think that is also an issue, that the university cannot really do a lot to prevent, but there are people who go out who are looking to be used in that way, which really does create a problem for the rest of us.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's definitely certain, social themes. I have some friends who do some of the netball socials, and I think that it's brilliant that they have such, the sports teams. I think at Exeter, I will say, I think it's brilliant that there is so many great societies, but I really think that I know that there's a social that they do with they join themselves up with the male societies, and I think that perhaps encourages that relationship, that kind of team mentality, or this idea of the rugby boy or the netball girl. I think, again, what we said, we were talking about the anonymous thing. I think in a really, really weird way, the uniform for the rugby boys is a real problem, because I've had a friend who was like, I don't know who he was, because you identify based on clothing and based on hair colour, and if everyone's wearing the same outfit, she couldn't buy. And yeah, I get that there's this idea that you can wear the outfit, but in some ways that justifies, they're like, well, how are they going to recognise me?
Can I just say something quickly about your point, Lottie, about girls going out looking for to be treated in this way? Personally, I don't think girls are looking to be treated in this way. I think some girls do go looking to, maybe have a one-night stand or something, and I think that shouldn't be something that's condemned. But I think I personally haven't met any girls that want to be objectified necessarily. It's a question of consent again. There's sexual assault, and then there's willing sexual conduct in a club. If someone's getting on well with a guy and they want to go home with him and they want to dance and do other stuff in the club, that's absolutely fine. But I just think consent is the main problem.
I think, if anything, we have to kind of help these women not see themselves that way, not expect that it's okay for them to be treated this way, because I know that a lot of women feel like it's okay for men to treat them this way because they have no sense of self-esteem at all. And I think it's not the women that should be blamed in this. I'm not saying that you blame the women at all, but I think we need to address this kind of toxic culture that, if a woman goes out looking for one-night stands, she's somehow loose or, has no moral or anything, or, was asking for it, because, like I said earlier, no one's ever asked to be hurt.
So it's known that a lot of people don't report incidents of sexual assault, and a survey was done in America, in the American universities, through the AAU, and the majority of people who didn't report sexual assault to police or campus authorities was because they didn't consider the event to be serious enough to report, even when it included forced penetration. And I think that's what's so surprising. There is very much this thing of, but the fact that I went to a Wednesday TP, a sports night social, I've brought this upon myself.
There's a study by the NUS on a similar topic, and it was saying that more than 2/3 of the women they talked to, 68%, have experienced some kind of harassment, and they didn't report it because it became every day to them that they didn't consider it extreme enough anymore.
I'd just like to add that I'm sitting here thinking and going through mentally, and when you prepare for something to talk about this, you go, well, how many times have I had things that have happened to me, and I went through, it's been so many, I'm in third year now, I'm in final term of third year, and I have had multiple accounts of varying harassment and assault, and I've not reported one.
Same. I've never reported.
No. Yeah.
Never reported one. I didn't know how to.
I think that the fear is...
I don't know how to report
it,
by the way.
It's not even that, though. It's also the guilt, because you see in the news how harsh, obviously rightly so, harshly treated men are for doing these acts to women. And for me, and I don't know if it's the same for you guys, when I think, it was only this, it was only that, I don't want to bring it up because it will ruin his future.
Exactly.
No, with me, I don't want to bring it up because there's girls who've had worse.
Yeah.
I know girls have had worse, and then I hate that there's that mentality, because I'm like, he only did this, he only did that. I mean, maybe I'm getting upset over nothing. Or even with a couple of times it's been because I've Well, with one, there was a boy that I had like a light flirtation with over the summer, but we'd like become friends, and then he'd groped me, and I was like, well, I don't know, I was kind of flirting with him, maybe it was my fault. The other week I was wearing like quite a short, like tight black dress because I, wanted to get dressed up, and I was having a lovely time, and I was dancing, and then I was like, well, I might have like accidentally asked for it in some way, and it's awful because I'm so against anyone saying that any girl's ever asked for it, but when it comes to me, I just can't think that way about myself. I'm like, well, maybe it was my fault, like, and maybe I'm getting upset over nothing. I just hate that that's a thing still, but it is, because like women just shamed so constantly, and you don't really recognise it until it happens to you, and then
like
happens.
That if it was your friend, you would have said something. It's just so difficult to kind of evaluate these things when it comes to yourself.
I do sometimes think there's also a mentality with friends. Sometimes it's so common that it becomes normal, and we don't even notice it. Yeah. So, derogatory comments. I can count in the last few days that I've had some. You just these comments, and then you'll tell your friends, or you'll say, oh, he touched me here or something, and they'll go, oh, it's fine. Sometimes even, female friends, I've had conversations with them, and they've gone, oh, no, that's fine, like, it doesn't matter, like, he didn't exactly, like, rape you or anything, did he? And it's like, well...
Do you think the university should do more to spell out to us that it is not okay, under no circumstance?
I think they're trying, but when I was researching for this podcast, I went on the Never Okay website for the first time, and Never Okay is something that gets thrown around, and it's kind of like, they're doing something, it's never okay, but I didn't specifically actually knew what Never Okay stood for. And it is very much spelling out what sexual harassment can include, and that sexual harassment doesn't have to be physical, but I don't know, I just find it quite shocking, like, personally, that I'm in my 30s now, and this is the first time I actually understood what Never Okay was about. So, while initiatives like that are great, maybe make them a bit more obvious and open.
Yeah, and I think it has to be said that Never Okay is run by the Guild rather than the university. So, again, you can say the Guild is actually doing more than the university. I don't know of anything that the university specifically does to help prevent this sexual harassment culture. And as you said earlier on, Liv and Phoebe, you don't actually know how to report these assaults, and that should be made more aware.
I think that the Guild do a lot to try and prevent and raise awareness for sexual harassment and assault, but I think it's so intrinsically ingrained in society that there needs to be more practical measures instead of just a campaign, because it feels like it's all spoken instead of direct action. And for me, when you guys were talking about not knowing how to report, I was doing some research last night, and I thought, right, say I wanted to report something, I'm going to try and start, researching how I do that. And I went onto the Exet University website, typed in sexual assault, and it came up with go to wellbeing services online if you want to report sexual assault. I went onto wellbeing, not one tab on the wellbeing site had sexual assault marked. I typed sexual assault in, nothing came up. It said book an appointment for your, mental health. It can be this long a wait. It's an emergency appointment. Are you thinking of taking your own life? I'm not saying that it is on there, but from my about half an hour of researching, I couldn't find anything on how to...
It should be more easily accessible.
Completely.
I think also I did a bit of research on not just Exeter University, but universities in general, and I came across a case from a Cambridge student. This Cambridge student, unfortunately, she went on a sports social, and she was forced into her room, forced to undress, and was raped. And there's CCTV of her running out of her room and out of her accommodation in just t-shirt and underwear, running to her boyfriend's house. And then she reported it to her college, because they have a college system there, and she basically didn't get any information back, and her rapist unfriended her on Facebook, and she was like, oh, okay, I guess they've said something to him. And she just heard nothing from them. And then they tried to insinuate that she'd had a one-night stand with this guy, cheated on her boyfriend, and then was calling it rape, because she didn't want to admit that she had a one-night stand with this guy. It was this culture of basically trying to protect the guy that raped her as much as possible and saying that it was her fault. So that's in a case when someone was actually knew what to do and reported it.
So Cambridge University did actually admit that they have a problem with assault on campus. Do you think our own university executives should admit the same? And do you think this would actually help the situation?
I think based on the Cambridge case, based on other cases on university campuses, and based on my own experience, again, lack of understanding, I think when you come in as a fresher, I think that it should be made explicitly clear to all students, not just female students, all students, the procedure for if anything happens. This is where you go, this is the services the university provide, this is what the guild will do, because I know that they are separate. Even if it's 2 separate emails, I want an email that sits there and goes, okay, for example, I've been spiked and in a club in Exeter. I reported it to the club, and I didn't know how to report it to the university or to the guild staff. And I know that they previously have things out in the guild, like the little bottle stoppers and things like that. But, basic things like that, they should say, like, well, if you get spiked, here is a contact, here is someone you email, here is the email, well, this is the information we need, and report it. Because if, for example, 10 other students that night were spiked, they can contact the club, and their responsibility is to be a representative of the student. I just think that it should be made very explicitly clear. They make everything else quite explicitly clear. Why can't they make that explicitly clear when you start as a
actually
fresher?
go a step beyond that, and when people come in as a fresher, be like, okay, so this is what sexual harassment is, this is what sexual assault is, this is how to tell if you've been spiked in a club, and this is what to do. This is what to do.
Like an introduction seminar.
Yeah, basically, and even just telling them what basic consent is,
They have time to give us the whole academic honesty spiel every year. So there should be time for this, especially considering that most people that come here 18, some 17, 19, but anyway, fresh out of home. Most of them have probably led quite sheltered, protective lives. They might not have gone to clubs before, so to them this might seem normal, and I think that's a very important and toxic thing to address.
Yeah, I am the only fresher here. So obviously I came in this year, and there was an optional email sent round with a survey on from Exeter and Devon Police that basically talked you through consent. It was so hilariously ridiculous in what it was saying. You've bought a girl a drink. Does she now want you to take her home? These were the questions asked, and it's like,
well.
Yeah,
oh,
we had
for
this
goodness
too.
sake.
When we had to register for this year
Yes.
as well. So that was when you registered.
Yeah.
And so everyone got that, and it was optional at the bottom.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
did it, for example.
Because it was optional, I know that the majority of people who I've spoken to about this from my own halls had not completed this email. And the fact that this email was as if it was written for a child who had never even understood the concept of consent, which fundamentally might seem like a good thing, but actually it was written so innocently almost, it bypassed all of the most serious matters. As I said, we were just laughing about it, and this isn't a laughing matter. It should have been written in a sense that you could actually get into it and go, oh, okay, no, I didn't actually realise that groping someone is in a club is sexual assault. Because I think a lot of people don't realise that is sexual assault.
It was quite leading as well, I must say. Like, I did the consent survey, and I was like, even if you were like kind of creepy and saw nothing wrong with groping girls, then you obviously knew which way to answer it to say that, oh, I'm not actually a creepy person, because then...
Absolutely.
Like, it was very much like, oh, if a girl is unconscious, can she verbally consent to sex? And it's like, no, because she's unconscious.
I personally think that the focus should be almost less on teaching what consent is and more on educating the culture around it. I think many people know what consent is and when it's wrong, but that still doesn't stop them doing it.
Yeah, it's the yes means yes policy rather than no means no.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh, I like that.
most people know that groping someone in a club is wrong, or like you say, most people know that groping someone is wrong, but when they're in the club with their friends and all in the same uniform, and it allows this kind of bending of the rules, if you will.
Also, I know boys that have assaulted girls, and like I know one of the boys that assaulted me, and if you went up to them and said to them, would you ever assault a girl, they'd probably go, oh no, I'd never do that, that's awful. But then they have done it.
Not even realise that they've done it in a way.
I think if you went up to a boy and was like, oh, have you ever assaulted a girl, they'd be like, oh my god, not me, I've never sexually assaulted anyone. Like, well, have you ever grabbed a girl's butt? And she's not said that that's okay. They might be like, yeah, once or twice. I mean, even if they admitted to it, because I think also like a lot of lads just wouldn't admit to the fact that they'd done something like that.
I think it is also very important to say, though, especially, we're a group of girls here discussing it, it is important to clarify it is not just a problem for girls. You know, this is also a problem for guys. And there are anonymous stories from men here at Exeter who've also experienced sexual assault.
And it's so sad because it's even, like, in a way, it's even more shameful for boys because it's like, but I'm a man, like, I shouldn't get assaulted kind of thing. And they might even not even know it's assault. Like, I didn't know that any form of touching without your explicit consent was sexual assault until like a few months ago. And then I'm like thinking of all the times that boys have like touched my legs or touched my waist, but I'm like, well, it wasn't my chest or my genitals or my bum, so I didn't count that as assault. But it is assault, and I think also lads don't know that. I disagree with
you on that one, though. I'm not entirely...
The official...
For me, officially, this is it. But personally, I think it's almost too PC. Yeah. You know, that's taking it a step too far because at the end of the day, a guy in a club, how's he going to do anything?
Oh, no, I mean...
if he can't even just be like,
no, I know,
hello, and, you know, touch you on your waist and go, oh, well, that wasn't with my consent.
I think, no, but I mean, in, like, times where people have been forced... Like, I had a guy sat next to me on a train, and basically he was wearing quite baggy pants, and he put his hand basically, like, in his pocket, but, like, through his pocket was, like, groping my leg, and I was like, and, like, he was making it look like he was looking for his keys or something, but he was quite clearly, like, squeezing my thigh, and I was like, doing, but in that moment I was like, absolutely, this is assault. I was like, this is very odd.
I think the issue comes when I was watching a debate on Question Time, and it was talking about sexual assault in the workplace, and I think the issue comes from when if someone, say, makes a sexual advance towards you and then you say no and then they continue, I feel that is when the sexual assault, unless it's obviously something extreme, but if someone, say, touches a thigh, touches a leg, personally, for me, I wouldn't count that as sexual assault until I then explicitly stated, or by body language or other forms, expressed that I was uncomfortable in the situation.
Yeah.
So for me, that's...
I think non-verbal not consenting is also a thing that people really need to think of, because the whole no mean no thing, it just opens up for people to say, oh, she didn't say no. Like, for example, the experience I had in a club, like a week ago, the guy like grabbed onto me, and obviously at no point did I say to him like, oh, get off me, but I pushed him away, and my friend actually grabbed me away at one point, and then he just like grabbed me back and wouldn't let me go. I can't actually remember how I got away from him, but I ended up doing it. But at no point did I say to him, get off me, because it was so scary. Because also then I found out the next day he'd done the same thing to my friend, but he'd like twisted her wrist for not kissing him.
I think the issue is teaching those basic body language, and I think that I've got to a point that in first year I was grabbed in the club, and I froze and moved away, and I don't know if anyone else has done this, but I tend to go to the girls' toilets in this situation, because I know it is safe, and I will work my way to the girls' toilets, and I'll sit down and I go, okay, so I'm just moving away from the person. For the first time in a club, I actually physically put my hands on a gentleman that came up to me. He was didn't look as like a student, he was older, he was trying to get a drink, and he tried to put his hand on me, and I was actually at the bar, so I looked to the bartender, and then I said, excuse me, no, and put my hands on his chest, and she was like, well, you should have done that, as if it doesn't happen, and I actually don't think I've ever done that before, and I think that should be, if they can physically put his hand on me, I can physically say, not in a violent way, in a no for passion, but you cannot take that as consent, and I think it's the non-verbal action, and if you continue to repeat his advances, then that's not okay. Yeah,
I spoke to an ex-policeman about this the other day, saying how, for me, I know when I'm going out, there's most likely I will be sexually harassed or assaulted, and he could not believe that it had got to this stage where every time you go out, this is what it is. But I said, absolutely, in my life, I know if when I go out clubbing, most likely something will happen. And he said, well, what do you do when this does happen to you? I said, I just move away. What else can I do? It really, really terrifies me, especially when they're drunk in a club. You don't know what they could do, whether their drunken nature is aggressive or anything else. And he said, well, the first thing you should do immediately is say, no, please get your hands off of me. And say it loud, because then you have witnesses around you who can attest to that. And I thought, actually, that's so true, because you're not doing anything, you're not being Larry back to them. This is just you stating, no, this is not okay.
I think that's such a good point to make, because like we've all said, we just move away. I think having that verbal cue.
Absolutely.
I know obviously it shouldn't be the case, but it would shock the guy.
I think so,
and
yes.
they go, oh, wait, no, I'm doing something that's inappropriate here.
And it shames them as well.
Yeah.
Like there's a public aspect to it, because
Absolutely.
Like we said, a lot of times things just don't get reported, but and in a way this is not reporting, but it's still drawing attention. Hey, there's a creep out here.
Yeah, this thing, it alerts to other
exactly,
women.
it alerts others.
I think there was a situation, again, like a verbal communication is key, because I feel like we're talking quite a lot about club situations, but I actually think in like relationship situations is an aspect that's maybe talked about less. I think that yes, it is when you're going out, but as someone who was in a long-term relationship for a while at uni, I think there's a lot of stuff that's put out there about going to the club or going in social situations, but actually a large chunk of these of assaults just in generally, kind of you a lot of times you hear about it's in relationships, it's in domestic situations, and I think equally as much as we can focus on verbally in that situation, that there is nothing wrong with doing that in a relationship situation. That is not a form, just because you're in a relationship with someone or dating someone or seeing someone or consented, even just to go for a drink with someone, that does not make it okay for them to touch you if you don't feel that that's appropriate.
Well, yeah, and also I do think like that's something that a lot of, obviously again I'm talking about girls, but the thing is in general I've only had situations where I've had girls talk to me about these situations, but I'm obviously sure it happens to boys as well.
I think that's also a large part of it, isn't it? There's so much shame behind a guy being sexually assaulted that they don't talk about it as openly.
Yeah, but in relationships, especially, like I was 17, I was with my first boyfriend, and essentially what my friend said to me is sometimes he's going to want to do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, but you should do it anyway. And it got to a point where with this boyfriend, because I was scared of upsetting him if I didn't want to do things with him, that I would tell him that I was on my period, so he wouldn't touch me.
We had stomach ache or something like that.
Yeah, I had a stomach ache, or I got a headache, or I was ill, and
it's sad that
it's
women
so sad that people have to do that.
No.
Yeah, and I think I even at one point I was wearing like a pad and I didn't need to, but I was like, well, just in case he tries to put his hands down my pants, like it's there, so he won't touch me anymore. And like at the time I was like, oh, I just don't want to upset him, kind of thing. And then now I look back at it and I'm like, God, how sad.
I know this sounds awful. I don't know if you guys do this too. When I'm walking back, I mean, sometimes I do walk back alone, but I will be on the phone, try and always be on the phone to someone, or
me too.
Whatever. I mean, obviously we do that together sometimes, but in my head I find myself running through, if a guy starts following me or tries to assault me, I find myself thinking like I'm on my period, or something that would put them off doing what they're going to do.
I feel safer walking home alone if I'm on my period.
Yeah,
because I'm like, well, if he tries to pull my pants down, there's going to be blood there, and that's gross.
All of us just said we walk home alone, and we are on the phone to someone.
Yeah.
I do not remember the last time I walked home alone without being on the phone to someone.
Yeah.
Last night I walked home from work, which is just walking home from work, and I most of my friends were on a night out, so none of them were replying. So I phoned my mum. I woke up my mum to have a conversation with her while I walked home.
Yeah, I've actually pretended to be on the phone.
Yes,
I've done that.
Oh God, I've had such
Walking
good
back.
conversations with myself.
I don't wear headphones. I do not wear headphones, and I have got to the point where I put my keys in between my fingers.
Also, I will change the way
like
I
a tiny
walk
knife?
and put a hood up to try and look like a man. I have genuinely done that
That's a
before.
genuine thing
I've
that
done
people
that.
say to do.
I've put my hood up and I've literally changed the way I walk, got a key, and been on the phone.
I have arrangements with my friends where basically if one of us wants to go home, we leave when the first person wants to leave, and we leave with them. We all walk home
really
together.
I stayed in a club and sat
And I'm
down
like,
waiting.
Yeah, also it's fine. Like I can go home. Like if I really want to party some more, I can just like drink with my friends that still want to drink in my house. Like I don't need to be clubbing.
I was actually walking home alone on Friday, and I think the only reason I felt comfortable doing that is because I do kickboxing. So for some reason, like I feel like I'd be able to defend myself, even though like I probably couldn't, because I mean I'm not a very tall person. So if someone like decided to hurt me, there was only that much I can do. But it's still like it's quite sad that the only reason I feel comfortable walking home by myself is because I do a martial art. Like that shouldn't have to be this way.
I read a story from the Telegraph about a student called Hannah from the University of Exeter. and quoting here, she says, "She was threatened with sexual violence twice in her first month at university, and on one occasion a drunk student she didn't know entered the room at 3 a.m. and refused to leave. Hannah says this was a common joke at Freshers Week. He told Hannah, 'I'm going to have sex with you, you're a slut,' and had to be physically removed by another male student." And it also says that Hannah, which isn't her real name, says a series of pranks with next door student went too far. He locked himself in her room, said, "Bend over, I'm going to rape you." Hannah was locked inside for 15 minutes until other students had her banging on the door and let her out. She was scared. Her parents urged her to report it at the university, but she said she had no idea who she could speak to, and she didn't trust officials to do anything. So in this article it also says, Exeter University says they investigate harassment complaints and discipline perpetrators. And this is a quote from them. It says, "The university takes all allegations of this nature extremely seriously. There are very clear and well-publicised support systems in place for all students. We would encourage any student who encounters incidents of this nature to report them immediately." Well, it's all very well them saying that, but
I think we've proven here today it's not well publicised enough.
No.
Because none of us know how to do it exactly. And just going back to the idea of all of us walking home alone, University of Exeter runs the estate patrol, where if you're feeling particularly uncomfortable on a night out, you can phone up the estate patrol and they will drive you back to your...
Oh, is that what they're for? Sorry, I thought they were just for drunk people.
There you go. You didn't know.
No,
So,
I had no idea that's what they were for.
a friend of mine who was in University of Exeter last year, I know that on a couple of occasions she phoned them up and said, "I've got separated from my friends. I really don't feel comfortable walking back by myself. There's been a man following me. Please, can you come and get me?" And the State Patrol went and got her and drove her home. No problem. I think that's a fantastic system, and actually was a lot to do with why I chose Exeter. They are stopping that scheme this year.
can I also say I was told by a State Patrol they should not be used as a taxi. So for me, I've never felt comfortable calling a State Patrol because I think, well, I could just get a taxi. But then again, you know, taxis aren't always safe. So for me, that support system hasn't ever felt very supportive.
I had
It's
no
also-
idea that's what they were for. The only people I know who've used State Patrol were when people were so incredibly drunk that they couldn't walk, and then they'd had to call State Patrol.
I think the reasons that they stopped doing the service were because people were using it as an excuse to get very drunk.
Yeah.
So there was quite a lot of calls out, but actually it should not be encouraged for that. As much as, yes, it has been used for that, and yes, there is people that get that drunk, it should be encouraged for those purposes, not for someone who's had a bit too many drinks, but for someone who
feels in an uncomfortable
situation, and that is not the same as I'm too drunk outside a club to be able to walk home.
Yeah.
That is not the same as I'm walking home, because then I would not necessarily always use that on a night out. I think actually I'm much more conscious of it when I'm walking
Because
home.
I think this was the best thing that the university did to help people in that situation as a response to it.
Actually, I think it shouldn't be stopped, even if people use it as an excuse because they got too drunk, because you're more vulnerable if you're really drunk. And I mean, if I was the university, I'd much rather drive home one too many drunk student rather than have that drunk student end up, seriously sexually assaulted. I don't understand the rationale.
Personally, I don't think the AU does enough to monitor the actions of sports societies in terms of prees and socialising. What do you think the AU can do more to help unsexualise the socials?
I personally think it should be almost the responsibility of the captains of those teams, because they're the ones that are leading things. And I know that's very difficult to regulate, but they're seen as authority figures. I think that people in sports teams are more likely to listen to their captains than they are to listen to warnings from the university because of that culture.
Equally, I think part of that is not just captain. I feel like actually sometimes social sex is taken as a position on society that's not regulated in the same way as captains or vice presidents. And in many cases, I'm not saying, I know captains who actually are quite involved in the sport.
Yeah.
So maybe drink less. Social sex are encouraged to, in a competitive way, to compete, to have that kind of recognition. And in fact, I think if you are a social sex for a sports society, I don't think there is anything wrong with someone sitting you down from the AU and going, this is okay, this is not okay.
Absolutely.
And I definitely think that the AU should be doing that. I think same way with captains, social sex, that is their role.
There needs to be almost a threat of something happening to the society if this is discovered, or if anyone reports something, say they can't play for the next, if one thing is is reported of sexual assault, they can't play for the whole term or something like that. There needs to be a strong deterrent to stop this culture continuing.
Ultimately, it's in their interest, because I'm sure, rationally speaking, no sports society would want to have this stigma almost. I mean, that they can't like it. So, if you just kind of phrase it that way, it's in your interest not to be seen as predatory, that might be...
Do you think the current AU president, Jim Balshaw, should be taking more of an active role in deterring this?
I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with telling social section captains of the sports societies it is not okay to sexually assault a girl in a club.
Or a guy.
Okay. I think it's completely acceptable for them to sit them down and say, you should not encourage it. Things like marking women in a club is not encouraged. And I think that they should have examples of those things happening, and I know that they must, because I'm sure, or encourage people to report those incidents so that they can say to them, this has happened at a social, we know it has happened, do not to do it again.
There have also been emails calling women from other sports socials, calling them specimens.
It goes back to the President's Club, the whole thing. It's a culture that just is everywhere, in groups across the world, and businessmen, brokers, sports teams, it almost seems insurmountable.
But I think the benefit of being a university and the benefit of, for example, our position in media societies is that we can try and at least do something within Exeter Uni. And it is insurmountable, but I will be very happy if I can get to the point at the end of uni and said, I've spoken out against it. I've specifically told my guy friends, and at least I have told some people that when they go out beyond university, they don't grow up to be a broker who does that in the President's Club. I think that we should use the fact that the university has the guild and those points of power to make sure that this doesn't happen post-university.
Yeah, that is true. And also, I think, anyone in a friendship group, if you see someone harassing someone, you should just say to them, hey, that's not okay. Because people listen to their friends. All it takes is one person saying to them, hey, that's not all right.
Not even just in a friendship group. I know that my friend, she told us last weekend that she went out the night before and she saw a couple of guys spiking a girl's drink, and she got absolutely furious. She was shouting at them and asking them how they could do it, and they were completely oblivious as to how bad what they just did was. And so she took this girl, and I believe she took her home. She's so really, really upset about it and angry, because also she doesn't know what she can do beyond just kind of putting them on the spot and yelling at them in the club.
Well done to her to saying something.
Yeah, definitely.
It made a difference to that girl's life,
really admire her for doing this.
Unfortunately, I've had a couple of cases of my friends' drinks being spiked, but we had absolutely no idea who did it, which was really just
Same
awful.
with my
And also, there's now a culture of lads spiking their friends' drinks because it's bant.
Yeah.
And it disgusts
I've had a guy
me.
friend.
Even with laxatives and things like that.
I know. But you can be allergic to laxatives.
Putting a substance in someone's body without their knowledge is a form of oral rape, if you will.
Absolutely.
Well,
and it can be really damaging. I think it's you can put something in someone's drink, and I know full well that I've had friends take swigs from my drink, and because they're my friend, I've let them do that. You have no idea what substance you're putting in each other's in someone's body by doing that, and especially someone who has been spiked. I think it's just incredibly dangerous, and again, very, very clearly needs to be set out to societies and social sex and presidents that is not okay, and it's not funny. Laxatives in a drink is not funny, because you have no idea what the effect that could have on someone else.
Well, because also two people, one of them was a girl, and it was a lad who bought her a drink and obviously did something to it, and then we just basically formed a human shield around her for the rest of the night until we could get her home. With the other one, it was a boy, and it's because he was in a group of lads, and one of them said to him, oh, my mate's buying us drinks, I can get him to get you one, kind of thing. And he ended up having the one that was spiked. And it's just, I hate that there's that culture around it.
It's
and
a roulette,
it was just,
almost.
basically. And
going out should not be a kind of roulette of do I get sexually harassed or spiked tonight?
Yeah. So as my last question to round off this debate, what do you think the university can do, the university alone that is, not the guild, but the university alone, to try and prevent this culture of sexual harassment and assault?
I would say I think it's like as we were discussing earlier, I think it's a using the entry point of freshers coming in as a point when they will read the most information. I know full well that like the point that I would read documents and emails was when I was a fresher. You don't want to miss out on information because it's a new place. That's when we should start talking to people. We shouldn't have to wait until a student is a third year. Use that as an entry point. It should not be optional. Consent is not an optional thing. It should be expressly set out. And I can't say specifically how I would do that, but an example is for an email that's not an optional consent form. An email that's sent out, even a mandatory lecture. And I know that there's been some controversy about those and that people that don't turn up, but for the 3 people that do who would have done it that evening, that's made a difference. And I think that it's not a negative thing to ask that of a fresher.
I think it could be useful to have kind of almost scheduled, I don't know how this would work, but scheduled time slots, maybe at Wellbeing or something, where it's a safe time and space where people can go and report what's happened to them. So it's like every week or every few days, you know that there's going to be this time in this place that you could go and talk to someone anonymously, not anonymously, but it won't be passed on, and they can give you support and guidance. Because I'm 100% sure that every single week there are people at this university that have something that they would want to, talk about, and an event that's happened to them. So I think that's a really practical thing that the university could do, just set up these almost call points for people.
Yeah. I mean, they also have the X Factor days that people have had to go on where it's about
for employability.
Yeah, employability. You could do the exact same things for that. With that, everyone who has an X Factor day, their student card gets scanned, and if people don't turn up, they get an email about it. And if they don't turn up to the second scheduled one, a penalty is enforced against them. I think with the X Factor ones, you get banned from all employability events on campus. If you could do that, but for sexual harassment and assault seminars, I think that would be really great, because then people are actually facing a penalty for not going. And even if they think it's pointless or whatever, I think actually
something will stick in there.
Yeah, something will stick. And I think with a lot of people, they're like, oh, this is pointless. But then if you actually sat people down and, maybe got videos, or even got people to actually share their own harassment and assault stories, there will always be at least one person in a room that resonates with. Probably
I think
more.
it's very important for there to be very specific definitions with examples so people know exactly what it is, because certainly the majority of my friendship group did not fully realise that groping in a club is sexual assault, and they did not know that. So many girls, when this happened, we didn't really know what to do. And I think certainly for me, in my personal experience, the culture of groping escalated a lot at university. I did not have this in my hometown clubs at all. This has been very much a university thing.
And therefore it's a university issue.
If they managed to work with the clubs wherein the clubs could have something with the university basically being have you been groped in our club, we want to know about it.
Yeah, or a text before each club night saying sexual assault of any form, verbal or physical, will not be tolerated.
Report it, kind of thing. Because
absolutely.
Also I honestly think the clubs themselves don't know the magnitude of sexual harassment and assault that happens with them. And I think if they said to people, report it if you've been sexually assaulted or harassed, because even if you're just reporting it to a club, and I think people would do it if it's just reporting it to a club, because it's not
less
legal.
serious.
It's less serious, and all it is anonymous saying, this happened to me.
Yeah, I think what we've kind of said is it's a combination. I think people tend to go, well, this is the focus, this is the focus, this is the focus. And I think what we've said is kind of a grouping of prevention, of action, and of response, and how, and it's a combination of all three. You can't just pick one. And that the university should have at least considered all of these kind of options, because it's not hard. It's taken us a little bit of time to talking about it, to come up with something, and they have a student population that can tell them these things.
Absolutely. And I think that perfectly rounds off what this debate has been for. So thank you very much to all of you. Having discussed the reasons for sexual harassment and assault in university, and ideas for preventing it, many interesting solutions have been offered by the students. We thought we should interview a Feminist Society member to find out her point of view.
My name is Olivia Gibson. I'm the General Secretary for Feminist Society, and I am passionate about the prevention of sexual assault because it affects most women from a very young age, regardless of background, as well as other genders, of course. Everyone experiences it, or at least every gender experiences it. And it's something that carries on throughout life and contributes to women not feeling safe in public, as well as not feeling safe in their jobs and various other areas of life.
How much of a problem do you think sexual assault is at UK universities and Exeter in particular?
I think it's quite a big problem at UK universities, from the everyday instances of sexual harassment to the larger problem of rape culture and lad culture that allows this behaviour to become permissible in certain social circles. And I've definitely experienced sexual assault or certainly unwanted touching at Exeter, and although I'm not entirely aware of the statistics, even a small number of cases of sexual assault or harassment is bad enough, it shouldn't be happening at all.
Why do you think it is so prevalent at our campuses?
I think it comes back down to the culture that makes it permissible. It should be something that people look down upon, but unfortunately people don't call it out, and this bystander effect, so being silent when you witness someone either being touched in a way that they don't want to be or being assaulted or harassed, is essentially condoning such behaviour, and I think that definitely contributes to it being such a big problem.
How do we combat the culture of sexual assault around campus?
Call it out. That's the number one thing that you can do. The more it's called out, the more people learn that it's a reprehensible behaviour and are less likely to do it. And of course, if you call it out, there are kind of social consequences to such behaviour, and people are kind of less likely to do it again because they've been reinforced to not do it.
Do you think the university is doing enough to combat sexual assault around the campus?
I think the university is trying, certainly. The Never OK campaign is a good start, but I feel like they could do more to make the consequences of sexual assault and harassment more serious. But I think Never OK is a start.
How well do you think the university deals with sexual assault if a student would come to them and say this happened to them?
But I think the number one thing that the university needs to do is to support the student and make it completely clear to all students that if they report a sexual assault or a sexual harassment, a case of sexual harassment, they will be supported, because that will make other people more likely to come forward with such cases, and that will kind of just contribute to making sexual assault and harassment that much less acceptable.
What do you see FemSoc's role in tackling sexual assault?
FemSoc want to give a voice to marginalised people, and part of that is marginalised genders, who are the people who are most likely to experience sexual assault and harassment. So it's part of our kind of job to make people aware of the problems that certain group of people are facing in society today. So sexual assault, misogyny, racism, ableism, transphobia, that all of the kind of prejudice behaviours, and how people can be an ally to those people, the people experiencing those behaviours, and help us overcome these.
In regard to our listeners, what are some of the key steps they could take to combat sexual assault?
As I said before, people should just call it out. If you witness someone being touched in a way that they don't want to be touched, or someone being sexually assaulted or harassed, if you don't call it out, you're essentially endorsing it, which contributes to it being, air quotes, not a big deal, when it is entirely a big deal. So not calling it out contributes to it being a permissible behaviour. So the number one thing that people can do is call it out if they witness it.
In general, how would you like to see universities and society's culture and attitude towards sexual assault change in the next 10 years?
I would like to see universities teach people about the culture that allows sexual assault to be so prevalent. So making people aware of the extent of the problem and how they can help combat it at the root is key to stopping this. And then also, as I said before, support and believe victims. So you hear about, false accusations of sexual assault, but these are in reality a tiny, tiny percentage, and oftentimes are found out and, dealt with accordingly, as they should be. But by supporting victims, you allow other victims to know that it's okay for them to come forward, and hopefully perpetrators would be more likely to face consequences, which again would contribute to the overall lessening of it as a problem.
Thank you for being interviewed for us today. You provided some really good answers. This has been Catherine Stocker with Olivia Gibson, General Secretary of the Feminist Society.
In the next podcast, we'll be focusing on how to report sexual harassment and assault and look into the recovery process for victims. Thank you for listening.
The Me Too podcast. Me Too.
Me Too. Me Too.
Me Too.
Me Too. Me Too. Me Too.